So I recently saw Kane Parsons' Backrooms in theaters, and it got me thinking. There are many ways you can define an era of human history. It's music, it's haircuts, it's memes. Another way is through the fears of its people. The Fear Lab is a research unit at the University of Aarhus in Denmark, where they study the recreational activities where human beings seem, strangely, to derive enjoyment from their own fear. Its co-director, Matthias Classen, said, "We all fear essentially the same things no matter when or where we are born. But sometimes, those very basic universal fears take a peculiar kind of local shape. Whenever the world gets unpredictable and scary, we see a huge uptick in people's interest in horror movies, which seems counterintuitive, but it suggests an important function for horror as a tool with which people try to make sense of a scary world. In the past, the shape of fear could be measured through folktales and myths. In the modern era, that takes the form of horror movies and digital storytelling communities. And if you look back in recent history, you find an interesting pattern. In the 1970s, horror movies that centered around satanic cults, like Rosemary's Baby, The Omen, and The Exorcist, captured people's attention. At the same time, a satanic panic was brewing in the suburbs over the new generation of teens that grew their hair out, listened to rock music, and experimented with drugs. In the 2000s, torture flicks like Saw and Hostel were all the rage down at the Blockbuster. And this coincided with the post-9/11 anxieties and cultural discourse around enhanced interrogation techniques. Torture. In the current era, I'd argue our horror of choice is Uncanny Valley horror. And in this video, I want to dive into why and what it says about our society. Hi, Internet. My name is Ribsy, and if you like looking at the world through a critical lens or have a passion for helping a 20-something with a communications degree pay off her student loans, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let's jump into it. The Uncanny Valley is a psychological and aesthetic concept describing the eerie or unsettling feelings that humans experience when encountering entities that look and act almost, but not completely, like real humans. I'll give you an example. Look at this robot. It doesn't make you uncomfortable, right? It looks like a regular old machine. Now, look at this robot. Do you feel that uneasy feeling? Like something's just not quite right? That's uncanniness. And the Uncanny Valley is the place on a scale where something looks human-esque, but not enough to be totally convincing. The Uncanny Valley was first hypothesized by robotics engineers, but the theory has gained popularity as a tool in horror, especially in online folklore communities and in the ARG genre. Key examples of Uncanny Valley horror would be Alex Kister's The Mandela Catalog and The Backrooms. The Backrooms originated in 2019 as an anonymous 4chan post. It was an image of an old office building with the caption, "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 100 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." In the months following that post, writers began to share their own stories about the Backrooms on subreddits. The Backrooms quickly had a micro-community of its own, and the lore began to build. They say that it's an afterlife, not for people, but for places. For every chain storefront demolished, every retail outlet bought out, every dead mall razed to the ground. A limbo for every building without purpose. Those in-between spaces, endless structures of unfathomable yet so clearly man-made. Edges in the curtains of memory, corners that open up at the seams of reality to let the unlucky wanderer in. The Backrooms are a seemingly infinite labyrinth of perfectly mundane and yet impossible rooms, skulked by strange entities. Kane Parsons' online found-footage horror series exploded in popularity and led to his directorial debut with Backrooms this past year. The movie Backrooms is set in the 1990s and follows Clark and Mary. Clark is a failed architect slogging through middle age who now owns a failing furniture store where he sleeps at night after his wife divorced him and kicked him out of the house. Due to this and his alcoholism, he seeks a therapist, Mary, who implores him to notice and change his patterns that resulted in lifelong loneliness. Mary has her own set of problems. She's still grappling with a traumatic childhood spent locked away with her agoraphobic mother, and feels like an outsider in her own life. After a series of mysterious power outages leads Clark into the basement of his furniture store, he discovers a rift in the wall, through which he slips and enters the backrooms. Clark's backrooms are, much like the rest, a series of labyrinthine and mind-bending rooms that are deceptively mundane. He quickly becomes obsessed with exploring the impossibly gigantic labyrinth, despite the mysterious and aggressive creature lurking within, seemingly always just around the corner. The myth of the labyrinth is mysterious and pervasive, over 3,000 years old and originating on the Greek island of Crete. In the original myth of the labyrinth, King Minos of Crete prayed to Poseidon to send him a sign proving that he had a right to the throne, so no one could contest his place. In answer, Poseidon sent him a beautiful white bull, on the condition that Minos would sacrifice it back to him. Basically, he was letting him borrow it. But Minos was struck by the bull's beauty and grew so attached to it that he decided to keep it for himself. Poseidon was pissed, and as revenge, he placed a curse on King Minos' wife, Queen Pasiphae, to be attracted to the bull. From that attraction, Queen Pasiphae became pregnant and gave birth to a creature so unnatural that it had to be cut from her body and forced out. It was the Minotaur, half man and half beast. Minos was ashamed and humiliated. The Minotaur had to be kept a secret. So Minos commissioned the brilliant inventor Daedalus to design the labyrinth, an impossibly large subterranean structure of twisting passages, designed to keep the Minotaur contained, forever roaming its endless hallways and dead ends until the day of its death. Not long after the labyrinth's completion, King Minos' favorite son, Androgeus, went to compete in the Panathenaic Games in Athens. What happened next is not agreed upon. Some say that the king of Athens, jealous of Androgeus' athletic ability, sent him on a quest to capture the dangerous Marathonian bull, which gored him to death. Others say that after easily sweeping the competition in the games, Androgeus' rivals assassinated him while he was traveling between events. Whichever version of the myth you subscribe to, Athens was to blame, and King Minos was outraged at the death of his son. So, as recompense, he forced Athens to send a tribute of 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete every 9 years. These young people would forcibly descend into the dark, endlessly twisting passages of the labyrinth, where they would wander fruitlessly, searching for an escape, pawing in the dark, as the Minotaur hunted them down one by one and destroyed them. This went on for 18 years, until the Athenian hero Theseus volunteered to join the sacrificial group. Theseus braved the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, and escaped the labyrinth, overcoming the monstrous hybrid of man and beast. In philosophy and psychology, the labyrinth represents the human mind, a dark and winding place hidden from the light of day, with dark secrets that lurk within. The Minotaur, half man, half beast, represents the shadow self, your primal instincts, your hidden fears, and the untamed passions that lurk within your psyche, which, if unleashed, could destroy you. There is a theme throughout Backrooms of true participation in one's own life. In her self-help book, Mary writes, "Do you ever feel like you're living behind glass, watching life happen? The window is right there. It isn't locked. The latch isn't painted over." This is a reference to her childhood, when she literally watched the world through a window as her agoraphobic mother wouldn't let her leave the house. But it's also relevant to Clark. In his therapy sessions, he describes everything in his life, his divorce, his failing business, his failed dream as an architect, as something that just happened to him, as if he has no agency or responsibility over his own destiny. So, when Clark stumbles across the backrooms, he becomes obsessed. He maps out every corridor. If you recall, Clark's original dream was to be an architect, and in a way, by being the first to map these corridors, he becomes their Daedalus. He feels a sense of purpose, of something greater than himself. And when he runs to Mary to tell her what he's found, and she doesn't believe him, Clark doubles down. He ends up leading 2 other people into the backrooms, who are quickly captured and destroyed by the creature lurking within, eaten alive. Even after barely escaping with his life, Clark is unfazed. He continues to make his expeditions. Eventually, Clark leaves Mary a voicemail saying that he won't be returning for his sessions. He says, I opened the window, Mary. Exploring these rooms feels like a way he can understand and participate in his own life without fear of failure or repercussions, without forcing him to feel rejected by ever interacting with others. He can return to these spaces that also never met their full potential. After hearing Clark's message, Mary ventures into the backrooms to find him. Clark finds her and chokes her into unconsciousness. Mary wakes up tied to a chair in what appears to be a kitchen, across the table from Clark, and surrounded by these not quite right humans. They are mute and have extra eyes and appendages, as if they were printed wrong by some giant printer. Clark reveals that they don't feel pain, and in fact, he's been eating them. Clark also reveals to Mary what he's learned. The backrooms remember places and people, but never quite right, and they change and degrade over time, like memories. This process creates the illogical, uncanny appearance of the rooms and creatures within. Things close to humans, close to familiar, but just off enough to be eerie. So what does it mean? This blend of two psychological concepts, the Labyrinth and the Uncanny Valley. Well, let me take it back for you just a little bit, to France in the 1980s. In 1981, the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, sorry for my pronunciation, I am not French, I don't know any French, I'm doing my best, wrote about the concept of simulacra. A simulacra is a copy of something that no longer exists. Baudrillard gives this example. Imagine there is a country, and then there is a map of that country, created at a 1-to-1 scale, meaning it's the exact same size. And imagine that map is then placed over the country, so everyone is then living on top of the map. They're walking over the map, driving cars over the map, building buildings on the map. Everything's on the map. Then, over many years, after everyone who was around before the map was created is dead, the map will become worn out and threadbare. It will become hard to tell what's the map and what's the original country poking through the map. But no one alive remembers a time without the map. Eventually, the map becomes the country. The map is real, and the actual country has been forgotten. So, a simulacrum is a copy whose original has been lost or forgotten after too many iterations or too much time. Baudrillard outlines 4 stages to this process as you dive deeper into a simulation. Stage 1 is a true and faithful reflection or copy of reality. So, let's say a paparazzi video of a celebrity. It's not literally the celebrity, but it is a faithful interpretation of that celebrity and what they did at that time. Stage 2 is a perversion of reality, where it becomes an unfaithful copy, but it can hint at the existence of the reality. So let's say it's the same video, but with footage of someone playing Subway Surfer in the upper right-hand corner. It's now not an accurate representation of what happened, but you can still kind of make out what the reality is. Stage 3 masks the absence of reality. So in stage 3, the sign is pretending to be a faithful copy, but it is a copy with no original. So let's say that someone runs the footage through one of those weird Yassify video filters that you see when you're watching telenovelas through TikTok videos, where now the video does not replicate reality, it is not a faithful rendition, but is actively trying to hide that fact. Stage 4 is the final stage. It represents pure simulacrum, in which the simulacrum has no relationship to reality whatsoever and doesn't even pretend to be real. Reality is inconsequential. This would be like if someone created an AI version of the video where the celebrity was a sexy tangerine or something. Once phase 4 is achieved, Baudrillard says we enter this thing called hyperreality, essentially a condition in which the distinction between reality and simulation has collapsed. Simulation replaces reality or even becomes more real than reality. And Baudrillard thinks that this has real effect on society and people as individuals. So some symptoms of engaging in hyperreality include a loss of meaning and authenticity, passivity and manipulation, because hyperreality thrives on passive consumption of its own content, fragmentation and alienation, because if there is no shared reality, it's really hard to connect and relate to other people. Erosion of identity, because if reality is constantly shifting, it's hard to maintain a stable sense of self. Moral and ethical dilemmas, because when real and simulated actions blur, it's hard to tell right from wrong and know what actually matters. And finally, the potential for social unrest, because people become frustrated and disillusioned because it's confusing and frustrating to live in a world where there is no perceived meaning. And as you may have gathered, these are many of the issues that we're facing right now. We live in constructed houses, our minds live in digital spaces flush with uncanny AI-generated simulacra that make it hard to know what's real. A world where people fall in love with AI chatbots and get arrested over fake body cam footage. So now, navigating the labyrinth of our minds, which is already a scary and twisting path, has become even scarier because we're living in a state of hyperreality and have no shared baseline of truth and reality to use as the string with which we'll find our way home to each other. In Backrooms, it's revealed that the monster that has been stalking every human who enters is, in fact, a giant monstrous version of Clark. A simulacrum of a version of himself that existed at one point in time on TV. It's a reflection of the way he feels about himself. And just as Clark is telling this monstrous version that it's okay, we don't have to leave the Backrooms, we can stay, it picks him up and devours him. He is destroyed by his own madness and the simulated version of himself that he created. In the end, the mysterious organization that has been monitoring the Backrooms rescues Mary from this Clark Minotaur thing and takes her to a secretive hideaway of theirs. While being interviewed, Mary asks the researcher what the organization is going to do with her. The researcher evades the question. Clearly, Mary will not be leaving the Backrooms with her life. And this realization washes over her like a wave of calm. She smiles. In her mind, we can hear gulls cry, a symbol of freedom throughout the movie, the promise, the relief of escape. After, the simulacrum of her, the not quite right carbon copy that the Backrooms created, lives on, silent, lifeless, and broken. When we pass on too, the simulacra of us will live on. Our digital footprints, digital accounts like records of our lives, empty rooms we once inhabited that are now hollowed and empty.